January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. Well, let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad, and for the next nearly 400 years had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening. The top stories. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has responded after Elon Musk said he doesn't have what it takes to lead the party. Farage said, well, this is a surprise. Elon is a remarkable individual, but I'm afraid on this I disagree. My view remains that Tommy Robinson is not right for reform and I never sell out my principles. Well, that's after Musk posted on X saying the Reform UK party needs a new leader. This apparent turn comes just a few weeks after Nigel Farage travelled to Florida to meet with Musk about possible funding for his party. This also comes less than 24 hours after Farage said there was no question on Musk supporting him personally. Elon's father, Errol Musk, spoke to Nana Akwe.
Friday the 3rd, I spoke on your channel, and as it happened, I said that, in my opinion, this was before these tweets, in my opinion, Farage is not strong enough to be the leader of the UK. You know, I can see that. It's quite clear to me. He speaks sense, but he doesn't have the strength for that, in my opinion. And subsequently now we've had this tweet from Elon, and I haven't spoken to Elon, but I agree. I completely agree with him.
In other news, heavy snow is causing some travel disruption in the UK as weather warnings remain in place. The Met Office had issued 2 amber weather warnings for England and Wales, forecasting 3 to 7 centimetres of snow in some areas. Parts of South England have also been warned of flooding. Rural communities have been warned they could be cut off due to the weather, with some areas facing up to a foot of snowfall. The UK Health Security Agency has issued cold weather health alerts, which remain in place in all of England. GB News can exclusively reveal the Prime Minister ignored a Rotherham whistleblower, Jane Senior's bullying complaint after she exposed child abuse and corruption while he was leader of the opposition in 2020. GB News national reporter Charlie Peter reports.
We've seen correspondence sent by Sir Keir Starmer's office that simply says, unfortunately, we won't be able to facilitate a meeting. Oh, but here is an online form for processing complaints. But fundamentally, I think what we've seen as a political reaction to this story, with both Kemi Badenoch from the Conservatives and Rupert Lowe from Reform and plenty of other commentators as well, they're all saying that, well, Jane Senior did have that national hero status. She was being being bullied, why didn't you take the time to meet with her, especially considering the reputation and fear that people had around the Labour Party and the CSE scandal and all the cover-ups?
Well, a Labour Party spokesperson has responded to the claims, saying all complaints are treated seriously and thoroughly assessed in line with our rules and procedures. Complaints are assessed via a specific process independent of the Leader's office, and this was clearly signposted in response to this correspondence at the time. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, I'm Josh Howie and this is Free Speech Nation. Hey, welcome to Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and when necessary, we push back. Coming up on the show tonight, are the mainstream media displaying increasingly blatant anti-Semitism? We speak to the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simmons, after he clashed with LBC's Matthew Wright live on air. Plus, why is the Labour Party so obsessed with redefining Islamophobia? Mohammed Amin weighs in. And after the grooming gang scandal that he helped to uncover makes headlines across the globe, we are joined live in the studio by GB News' very own Charlie Peters. And, of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. My comedian guests this evening are Paul Cox and Adam Kumas. There you are. Here you go. Well, Happy New Year. Is it too late to say Happy New Year?
No, I think so.
A few more days we can get in there. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. You been in America?
Been in America, yeah. Just got back last night, so yeah.
Very good. And you were in
Hampshire.
Yeah.
Just as exotic.
Not even the new one.
Yeah.
Very, very close there. Well, look, we're going to crack on with some questions. Our first question is from Chris. Hey, Chris.
So, given what Elon Musk has said today, does Reform UK really need a new leader?
OK, big story of the day. Is Elon Musk right? Does Reform UK need a new leader? The Tesla and ex-CEO took to his social media platform today to say the Reform Party needs a new leader. Farage doesn't have what it takes. That's the tweet. So, what do you think? Now, you were shaking your head as you asked that question. I take it, are you a fan of Mr. Farage? Are you a Reform voter? Is that too personal? What underwear are you wearing?
Reform does not need a new leader.
OK, yeah.
Nigel Farage is doing fine, in my humble opinion.
If you put your mic... Sorry, just... Yeah.
I'm sorry for anyone at home that couldn't hear me. Nigel Farage is doing...
He was just saying that he hates Nigel Farage.
Reform UK does not need a new leader. Nigel Farage is doing fine. Elon Musk is clearly too, in my humble opinion, he's too to the right of Nigel because of other things he's been saying. Nigel doesn't agree with him. Nigel has pointed that out. And Elon Musk, I think, if what we've seen on the news today is to go by, he doesn't like it, and he's therefore said, well, I think in that case you're weak and you need to be replaced as leader, and I don't think that is the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, this comes just a couple of weeks after Nigel Farage went and hung out with Elon Musk, and it seemed to be going well. It's like, oh, we get on really well. Here's 100 million quid or dollars or whatever it is. It wasn't that much, but...
No, we don't know what he's going to offer. Zero. Zero seems to be the new number. This is really interesting. First of all, this is what free speech is about. Free speech, particularly in the US, with their First Amendment, not necessarily in the UK. Elon Musk, he owns the platform. He's able to say what he likes to. I think he's shooting a little bit quickly. I don't think that we should be listening to him in the sense that if Elon gets up in the morning and is particularly angry with one politician, whether that's one of my flavour or one of someone else's flavour, we should immediately jump quick smart to that. Elon is failing to understand something with regards to even the right within the UK. Tommy Robinson, which essentially what this is circling around at the moment, is UK political kryptonite. It doesn't matter where you sit on the spectrum of left and right. Well, it does, actually. If you sit anywhere right up to the right, most people will say he should be in prison and always in prison. I don't believe that's necessarily true. There is a lot of bad things about Tommy Robinson, however. But nobody, I don't think, is going to be able to come out in UK British politics, even after this weekend, and say, I support Tommy Robinson, he should be part of our political party, and have any chance of winning anything.
Yeah, he's a very polarising figure. Elon Musk, we have seen in the past, and there's a lot to respect the guy for, and his inventions or the things he's invested in, and of course buying Twitter, now X. But he seems to speak a little bit too quickly about stuff that he arguably knows little about. He probably saw one interview with Jordan Peterson with Tommy and went, this guy's amazing, what's wrong with this guy? How's he... he's saying free Tommy Robinson. Well, it's not as easy. You actually got to read some stuff on this to find out why he's in prison in the first place, for pleading guilty, for starters. And this is what we've seen. Do you think Elon Musk might then turn around afterwards and go, oh, actually, I read this piece in The Spectator and no, I was wrong?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, this comes across... This feels very reactionary from Elon. I think,
Oh, you're first-name basis, are you?
Oh, yeah. Well, with Mr Musk, sorry.
Have some respect here, please.
I did just come from Austin, so I feel like maybe I know him. No, yes, it feels very reactionary from him. I think it's one of these things where I think if he was sort of lived in the UK for a bit and he actually had a feeling for what Tommy Robinson represents and what Farage represents, he might sort of then go, actually, you know what, we don't need a new leader. Because I think overwhelmingly, most people who voted for Reform or were part of the Reform Party or actually kind of realised everyone's quite happy with Nigel. He's doing quite a good job. If there was like a ground swelling from beneath, everybody was feeling like Nigel wasn't doing enough and there was a bit of resentment, a bit like the way there is with the Labour Party and Keir Starmer, I think if he said that, there might be a bit more support behind it. But I think everyone's going, no, he's doing a good job. He's reasoned, he's quite rational, he's intelligent. He clearly has Britain and British politics, as one of his main priorities. And I think, to sort of disregard that seems a little bit out of touch with the British public.
Well, also the other things that Elon Musk obviously doesn't understand is that Nigel Farage pretty much literally is the Reform Party. Like he owns it in as much as it's a company. So no one's kicking him out.
What I think there's a couple of things here. We're in for a lively 4 years with Elon Musk in the position that he's in, because you can see what he's done here with Nigel Farage, who was his best mate just a few weeks ago. He will do these things with Donald Trump over the next 4 years. He has some strong opinions. He will share them. Now, with someone like that, who is very powerful, you just have to take some of it with a grain of salt and accept that's his opinions, he's entitled to it, but we don't change our whole political landscape based upon it. Now, if he's feeling emotion associated to the grooming gangs, aren't we all? We're furious. So if that's born from that emotion, we understand it, but you can't just make changes like that.
Yeah, and maybe just read some more stuff. Our next question's from Tom, who emails in. Oh, is Tom or not? Is it an email in? OK. The question is Dungeons and Dragons racist? No one wanted to ask that question in the audience. This looks like the most Dungeons and Dragons audience I've ever seen.
Yeah, you did
Crazy. Right. The people behind Dungeons and Dragons, we're like, oh, we're too cool for Dungeons and Dragons. The people behind Dungeons and Dragons, the tabletop game of choice for nerds and middle-aged men. Who still live in their mum's basements. No, OK, no. I'm a massive fan of it. OK, have removed racial differences from the game. There is no longer a distinction between orcs, elves and dwarves, and the term race has been replaced by species to be more inclusive. Wow. I don't know why I'm going to you first. You seem like you've lost your virginity less.
I lost mine last year.
I know you had a child, but I don't believe it.
So I didn't understand some of this story. Orcs and elves and dwarves and things. Yeah. I mean, some of it was a little bit lost on me. It's obviously a fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, and so is a lot of these accusations of racism now. I mean, what they're trying to... I mean, it's inherently racist to say that Dungeons and Dragons is racist because elves are depicted in a certain way, or orcs are strong and therefore that represents a type of human race. I mean, you've got to imagine this yourself, so therefore the imaginer is the one that's most racist in this whole problem.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, the critics of this move say essentially it's just making them all humans. but with pointy ears or whatever. And also it changes the nature of the game. The whole point of having these attributes is that you work to your strengths or not.
Yeah.
Is this sort of what we've seen across everything? Let's just make we're all the same.
Yeah, but there's no. It sounds like, when I read the article, it sounds like someone who's never played a proper game of Dungeons & Dragons is actually sort of making these new rules. And first of all, like, I think with language, I'm not too bothered about the language. I think if you want to call an orc and an elf a different species rather than race, that kind of makes a bit more sense. I guess they're very different and things like that. But then getting rid of like characteristics like orcs being 2 times stronger, things like that. It just sounds like you're making the game very boring. And maybe this is a good thing. So it'll stop people playing it and get out of their basements and get.
No, not at all. I mean, I remember one of my favourite moments when the orcs got it on with the elves.
That's a different game.
Okay, our next question is from John. Hey, John. Oh, John.
It's John.
Should transgender people be allowed in the police force?
Yes, should transgender people be part of the police? So this is more specifically, 1 in 4 police forces in England and Wales have allowed trans officers to carry 2 warrant cards or more if they're gender fluid. Police use these cards to identify themselves and must show them before using powers, including and crucially, stop and search. John, what do you think of this?
Well, I'm not a great believer in this trans thing. I think I've only knowingly met one such person.
Okay.
Seems to be a
but
mental health issue.
having police officers using these warrant cards, we saw someone like Wayne Couzens. That's how he, that's how he introduced himself and won over or persuaded. Where someone's coming in and saying, "I'm a woman," this is obviously allowing people. It can be open up to abuse, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John. I'm going to go to these guys if it's okay. But it was good chatting. We'll talk next week.
Yes.
So,
could someone get John more red wine?
No, please don't. So I believe it's 2/3 of police forces are allowing this policy. And the argument is, of course, that it can be used, and you can use them. Then you can say, "Well, I'm a woman, and I can now strip search a woman."
That's such a good point, Josh. Look, on the face of it, if someone says to me, "Should trans people be able to be in the police force?" Yes. I find it difficult to go, absolutely not whatsoever. But then when you start looking at the detail and you think, well, should they be able to strip search? Should they be able to search
showers with their colleagues?
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't think that a female trans, i.e. a man to woman transitioned person, should be able to frisk a woman at all. And as a very minimum, if you say, "Oh, that's outrageous, Paul," as a very minimum, the person who's being frisked should be asked if they consent to it. And if they don't, it's as simple as that. And also, I mean, there's a lot of problems with identifying dead bodies, for instance. Is it male or female? Oh, I don't know.
Well, let's check their warrant card. I mean, it's great. And also, there's the argument that less women are going to want to go into the police force if they're not sure that they can be safe as a shower.
Yes.
And by the way, when you say transitioned, what you mean in most cases is just someone who's put on a dress. You just said, "Now I'm a woman."
Yeah, they haven't gone through the longer process. Yeah, I think this is interesting. It's again, I'm going to echo Paul's sentiment. On the surface of it, if you just say, "Should trans people be allowed to be in the police force?" you think yes, but there has to be parameters, there has to be rules taken into place, there has to be safeguarding. You have to have a lot of common sense, and these are very important because as soon as these aren't put in place, you are going to have these positions where people are just thinking, "Well, I don't feel safe. I don't want, and I don't want to be frisked by someone who's maybe biologically."
And if this is coming from the police force, of course, they're the ones who are meant to enforce the rules for the rest of society. Our final question is from Luke.
Good evening, guys. Why are so many young single men turning to religion?
Yeah, so this is the new phenomenon of young single men flocking to the Orthodox Church because it's more masculine and pushes them physically and mentally. Priests are now planning to open new parishes to accommodate the tsunami of young men who have converted since the pandemic. Are you Orthodox?
Well, as a very, very devout atheist, then I would say they should just run as quick as they can because it's,
do the thing. Have you seen this from, I believe it's mostly in America, but the argument actually spreads, I think, to the UK, because I've noticed a lot of friends of mine who are Christians leaving the C of E and going towards Catholicism because they believe it's a more authentic experience?
There's a couple of things going on here. A lot of sort of male influencer types, YouTube channelers, Instagram influencers, are basing a lot of what they say in the Christian religion, and they're doing so to, you know, and I have no issue with that. I'm a man of faith as well. Sorry to hear that you're not, but, you know, I don't. It's not an issue to me, and it shouldn't be to anyone else, to be fair.
No, I mean, look, he's fine with going to hell.
Yeah,
absolutely fine.
No, not at all. Luke's a lovely guy. Luke's this is not what this is about.
I'll put in a word for you.
But I think what we are seeing is because there is an element of this based in faith, people are discovering faith and finding out that, like the C of E, the Protestant Church in the UK, are feminised somewhat.
This is what they talk about in this article.
And so they are looking for more orthodox, sort of almost Old Testament type Christian scriptures in order to...
It's called Judaism.
Yeah, which I was going to get to. Do you know any Jews? And that's what's taking us in that direction. Whether it's a good... I think it's better, and I'll probably get in a bit of trouble for saying this, it's better to have that and be influenced by that than it is by Andrew Tate.
OK, that's an interesting thing, yes. It's this, in that you've read this article as well.
Yes, of course, yeah.
It's an interesting phenomenon. The argument goes, of course, young men are looking for direction, and if they, wherever they get it, and if they can use this in a sort of positive way, then it is, as you say, better being pushed in this direction rather than, you know, pimping.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like it's easier to church than to go to church than to pimp, to use your words, Josh.
Very controversial for you.
But I think this to me this comes as an identity issue, wanting to belong to part of a group, being part of a group that maybe celebrates the male or masculine identity rather than shuns it. And I think we've seen maybe across the board, and especially in like Protestant Christianity, that maybe being masculine it's diminished a little bit. So it's no surprise to me that people are moving towards this.
And the other flip side of the coin, of course, as it talks about, it's about 60% of these new converts to Orthodox are men, but it doesn't talk about the 40% who are women who may be looking for a similar part of that phenomenon.
Yeah, it's not like it's 80-20, it's 60-40.
It's interesting. Right, next on Free Speech Nation, I speak to the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simmons, after he clashed with LBC's Matthew Wright live on air over the Israel-Gaza conflict. See you in a sec.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
British 10-year-old has beaten Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein in an IQ test, would you believe? Genius Krish Arora got the maximum score of 162, which puts him in the top 1% globally.
Goodness me. Well, Krish's parents noticed his brilliant potential after learning he could read fluently by the age of 4.
Krish, how does it feel to be a child genius?
I feel really happy and privileged.
Aww. Do you see it as a gift that you have?
Yeah.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Nichelle, what do you make of your child being a genius? When did it become apparent to you that Krish had something different, something special?
I think at the age of 4, he was doing things that were way beyond and above his age.
Yeah.
He could read fluently, and he could spell correctly, and he was doing complex decimal divisions. So we thought that he's on to something. I think there's a spark out here.
Wow. And how were you reading books, Krish? Did you just pick them up from your mum and dad's bookshelf and just start reading to yourself?
We used to go to the library and we got books.
Such a good tip. Such a good tip as parents.
Yeah.
Head to the library, take your kids to the library.
So, Nichelle, can Krish just do it all? Is he just an all-rounder genius? Every subject, every talent, he can do it all?
Absolutely, and he helps out the family as well. He's been teaching me grade 1 piano, and he hopes, and I repeat, he hopes that I'm going to complete it in 12 months' time. And he also helps out Mum, because when Mum is teaching his sister, Mum sometimes says, Krish, go solve that problem and, help your sister out. So, yes, he can do it all.
Krish, you're a superstar.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support. It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It seems that a Jewish person can't be interviewed by the media today without being repeatedly bashed and hounded about the actions of the Israeli government. That's what happened to the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, when he was interviewed this week by Matthew Wright on his LBC show. Despite not being an Israeli government spokesperson, he was confronted with claims about Israel's secret service and repeatedly questioned about Jews killing children. Not a good look. Joining me now is not an Israeli government spokesperson, but editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons. Hello.
Hi.
I like your look.
I like your look. Love it.
So, Jake, interestingly enough, this is the first time I've ever met you.
Yeah.
Even though I've written for years for the Jewish Chronicle. Very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
I was shocked hearing the clip this week. Would you mind just explaining the lead-in, and then we'll actually play a little excerpt?
Sure. Well, ostensibly, I was invited on the programme to talk about the latest news, which is that incidents of anti-Semitism have spiked since October the 7th. I mean, this isn't really new, but it was new to LBC, at least for this programme. And also, apparently, incidents of anti-Muslim hatred spiked as well after the Southport stabbings, if you can recall that happening as well. So I was invited on to talk about that. But in his introduction, Matthew Wright disclosed that he'd located the two people to blame for this rise of anti-Semitism, and they were, amazingly enough, Nigel Farage and Alison Pearson. Farage for apparently whipping up incitement after the Southport stabbings, and Alison Pearson because she was visited by the police for tweeting something, and then the case was later humiliatingly dropped. So it came to me. I had to, defend Alison and Farage. Farage because he questioned the police when they said it wasn't a terror incident. Later on, we found out that it was. I mean, he was charged with a terror offence and was found in possession of an Al-Qaeda manual, and Alison because she hadn't done anything wrong. So I defended them and tried to get onto the subject at hand, but he wouldn't let it go. He was determined to talk about how the media was to blame for this anti-Semitism. And so we ended up getting into a debate about the media depictions of Israel and so forth. I put across my point of view, which was that the media, the mainstream media as it's called, is largely complicit in pumping propaganda into people's homes by parroting Hamas figures, which edit out any terrorist casualties, and also airing Hamas-censored material, which only shows civilian casualties, no terror casualties, giving people the impression that this is a genocide rather than a war. And he didn't like that and insisted on knowing how many children had been killed.
Well, at this point, I'd like to listen to that little clip where we get to.
How many children have been killed by Israeli forces then?
Look, I can tell you that if you look at the report that came out last week, it showed that the Hamas figures were fabricated.
How many? I just want to know what the accurate Jewish figure is.
What I can say. The Jewish figure? What do you mean by that?
Well, the figure that you as a Jewish man want to put out there, the official figure, not the Hamas figure.
I'm not sure that the Jewish figure is really the best way of phrasing this, Matthew, but...
well, any figure.
See, now that would have me throwing my radio across the room if I'd heard it. Could you sort of talk us through why that is so insanely offensive?
The Jewish figure, I mean, it doesn't sound brilliant, does it? It makes your skin crawl when you hear the Jewish figure. I think it sort of suggests that this is a racialized debate, that we're not simply talking about, how many people have tragically been killed in Gaza in a war which was started by Hamas, and trying to get to the truth of this. But it's got a racial component. It's about Jews. It's about Jews and killing. And Jews and killing and children. He, after that, emphasised how many children had been killed. In fact, in that debate, you heard him emphasising how many children had been killed. And funnily enough, the discussion went on to talk about other causes of anti-Semitism in Britain, and I pointed out that there are these underlying anti-Semitic tropes in our culture, such as the blood libel, in which Jews are depicted as relishing killing children, and that started in 1144 in Norwich, when Jews were accused of killing a small child, and it's been in the bloodstream, so to speak, ever since, the cultural bloodstream, people naturally having a sense that Jews just like killing children, they can't help themselves. And it seemed to sort of resonate when Matthew continually asked me and demanded to know, even though I don't speak on behalf of the Israeli government, I'd come on to talk about anti-Semitism figures in Britain, sort of insisted on demanding I tell him how many children the Jews had killed.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I took from it, and it seemed, like you say, that he was somewhat obsessed or caught on this particular point. And the irony being that you're there, I guess, to talk about how anti-Semitism is propagated, and he's doing it as you're talking about it. But of course, and not to say that he is even conscious of these things, because they are so sort of deep down within our culture.
I think the whole thing really pointed to how effective this propaganda has been. Hamas producing it and the media amplifying it willy-nilly across the world with all the power at their disposal. I mean, the fact that nobody in the media, or very, very few, I think maybe 3 to 5% of reports about Gaza have cited the Israeli figures, which are about half the combatants are terrorists. But the 98% of reports have been articulating Hamas propaganda, which is that they're all women and children, 70% women and children, and the combatants have simply vanished. This stuff is really pernicious, and it's affected people's minds. And when that's combined with the fact that the BBC and others don't produce a health warning saying the following footage has been censored by Hamas, that's why there are no terrorists in the footage, only dead and dying civilians or suffering civilians. These things give viewers the impression they've seen with their own eyes that a genocide is happening. And when you put the figures in front of them, the facts in front of them, they say, no, it can't be. And it keys into this cultural unconscious, which is that the Jews just can't help themselves but love killing and deception, and particularly killing children. I think that's what we saw to some extent working its way up in that interview.
Yeah, I mean, look, I want to be fair to Matthew. I don't know him. And just as a broadcaster, I mean, I've only worked in television for a relatively short time. But one of the things I guess I've learned is that, and this is a bit of a secret, but sometimes the people who are on telly in these kind of shows don't know that much about what they're talking about. Now, this is something I happen to know a lot about, but there are other times where it is, in his case, he's catching snippets here or there from social media, as you say, Hamas propaganda, and saying, I read this thing one place. It then can obviously tie into their underlying prejudices, but it's sort of very frustrating when these facts, it is available, this kind of information out there as to, as you say, this idea that this fact that at the moment it's a one-to-one casualty, civilian casualties to combatant, which is the lowest ever, including, with the UK Army's history.
That's right. I mean, I wouldn't like to reach into his soul and say that I know that this man is an anti-Semite or anything like that. But it's interesting that he quickly managed to turn what was supposed to be a discussion about rising anti-Semitism figures in Britain. These are police figures, so anti-Semitic crime across Britain. And suddenly he turned it into a hostile interrogation about the number of children that are being killed in Gaza, seemingly without any self-awareness that this was a bad look. And yes, maybe he didn't know about the Hamas figures, the details, the intricacies of the casualty ratio and so on and so forth. But that wasn't what we were there to talk about. We were there to talk about something entirely different. And the fact that he happily brought it into a kind of Today programme style interrogation of me about something that was totally irrelevant just rather proved the point of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, you spoke out about it, and hopefully people will, bring more people to the attention of what are facts, but it's very frustrating out there. I don't know if you saw a thread that, speaking of the BBC, and I don't want to just BBC bash because, I'm on GBNews and now I'm going to BBC bash about it, but these tactics are not dissimilar to what happened to the BBC recently, where they had a rabbi on, they also had an imam on, and they had someone from a church on, and then you saw it was sort of broke down how they sort of dealt with each person, and when it came to the rabbi, suddenly they were like doing pretty much what happened to you, where it's all about the figures and whatever, and the other religious people weren't treated that way at all. So this is across the board. This isn't Matthew Wright specifically. This is across media.
Yeah, that was Rabbi Gideon Sylvester speaking to the BBC about Hanukkah. Alongside a priest and an imam. And as the investigative journalist David Collier first pointed out, the priest and the imam were both given a very easy time of it. And while they were speaking, B-roll, other footage played of peaceful scenes of nativity and whatever, that sort of thing. But when it came to the rabbi, the tone was very hostile. And the footage that was played alongside him was of tanks and war and aggression. And he actually felt that he'd been ambushed. He complained to the BBC producer. And as the Jewish Chronicle revealed a couple of days ago, the BBC producer actually sent him an apology. He felt that he wasn't, he'd treated him unfairly in setting him up for that kind of interview that was carried out by Ben Brown, I think it was, in that kind of way. So I think that sometimes there is a perception of these double standards when it comes to Jews, Jewish figures, religious figures, journalists like myself, other people. We find ourselves having to bat away accusations of genocide before we've even drawn breath. And I guess that just proves the climate today, in Britain today, and that was what I gone on to talk about in the first place.
OK, well, it's not going to happen on Free Speech Nation. Thank you very much for joining us. Jake Wallace-Simon's there. Well, I like those glasses. I think I'll get those for next week. Next on Free Speech Nation, after grooming gangs hit the headlines, it's now time for our government to redefine Islamophobia. Is it? We'll find out after the break.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It stays cold through the week ahead, overnight severe frosts and the continued risk of snow and ice at times too. Low pressure still in charge to end the weekend and into the beginning of next week, but it is pulling away, dragging in cold air still across many areas with wintry showers. But a cold end to Sunday, further rain and snow, particularly across northern England, southern Scotland. Warnings for snow and ice still here overnight. Heavy rain though pushing eastwards across southern and central parts of England and Wales. Again, a Met Office warning out here, could be some localised flooding. Temperatures below freezing across Northern Ireland, Scotland, some icy stretches holding up above freezing across southern parts to start Monday morning, but an unsettled start to the day. An icy start across Scotland, some disruption possible with wintry showers across the north, some clear spells across central parts, but quite frequent snow showers towards the Edinburgh area. Could be some tricky travelling conditions first thing. And across Northern Ireland, Northern England, wintry showers here, further snowfall, particularly over the higher ground. Snowing over the high ground of Wales as well, but elsewhere generally the precipitation falling as rain, fairly cloudy skies as we push through the day, and quite windy too through the day tomorrow. We'll see some gales around the coast, particularly in the east as the low pressure pulls away. Frequent showers still continuing here, falling as snow over the higher ground, some icy stretches continuing, and temperatures on the cold side, perhaps 4 or 5 degrees at best, locally 6 or 7 in the far south to end the afternoon. And then a quick look at Tuesday, a cold, frosty, icy start once more. Met Office warnings likely to be issued as we get closer to the time, and a day of sunny spells and wintry showers across the country. Showers most frequent across the north and the west. The further risk of rain and snow heading towards the middle of the week across southern counties. Temperatures staying on the cold side. See you soon.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
to Free Speech Nation. In the week that the grooming gang scandal hit the headlines, there is a report in The Spectator that the government is still planning to press ahead supporting the adoption of a definition of Islamophobia. This has led to campaigners urging the government to scrap its plans. Many critics worry that a definition that roots Islamophobia as racist for targeting Muslimness would curtail free speech and make it even harder for whistleblowers to speak up on issues like the grooming gangs in Rotherham, where largely white children were abused by Muslim men of predominantly Pakistani heritage. Joining me now is the former chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Mohammed Amin, written, I believe, extensively on this particular subject, haven't you? Welcome, first of all, to the show.
Good evening, Josh.
Hello. So you have written about this subject before. Would you mind telling our viewers what your views are?
Yeah, my view is that the word Islamophobia has suffered from a terrible attempt to define it back in 1997. That definition was appalling. Since then, there have been several further attempts to revise and improve the definition, none of which have been any good. The one that seems to have caught on is the one from 2018, produced by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims. But that definition also, which you read out part of, is frankly no good. And I never use the word except when I'm talking about the word.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe you proposed different, like, you know, because anti-Muslim bigotry, that's a real thing, of course.
Well, the key point is that I'm a Muslim. I don't want to be attacked in the streets, and I don't want people to discriminate against me. What you think about Islam is up to you. And the word Islamophobia confuses those two things. That's why I talk about anti-Muslim hatred and anti-Muslim bigotry.
Yeah, I mean, there's this idea that it became popular from Iran, and actually it was a deliberate effort to conflate the two in terms of the criticism of the religion. And obviously in the UK we have blasphemy laws, and that, if this bill, if it was pushed through by the government, that would obviously have an impact on blasphemy laws, right?
Well, there's not going to be a blasphemy law in this country because the government's got more sense. We abolished our blasphemy law around about 2006, and the blasphemy law we used to have only protected Christianity anyway. The definition I mentioned that came out in 1997 was from a working party organised by the Runnymede Trust, which did actually focus on attitudes to Islam, and that was one of the things that was really bad about the 1997 definition. It's a word that's never recovered from that first awful attempt at a definition, which is why I think the word should be abandoned.
Do you think that the government will go through with its plans?
Quite possibly, because I don't think they are... Most people haven't gone in for deep analytical thinking about the word. That you have to sit down and start with the definition, read it carefully. The first thing that's nonsensical about it is it talks about racism. Now, it uses the word racism in a way that only academics use the word, because the man in the street, racism is about races. Races are things you're born into. You can't change your race the way you can change your religion. And even people who know nothing about Islam know that Muslims are not a race. Anybody can be a Muslim, including somebody who's absolutely pure white with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah, I mean, the Equality Act, it's not just people in the street. According to law, in the Equality Act, race, colour, ethnicity and nationality, those are what are tied together. They specifically leave out religion, which would then be brought into that.
But the APPG definition uses the word racism in a very technical sociological sense, the way that's only used by academics and the man in the street does not understand. Because according to the academic definition, you could be racist against people who play chess. You really could.
Well, and deservedly so. I prefer backgammon. But how, I mean, this law, if it did come in, or this guidance, it would also potentially harm Muslims as well. Muslims who are criticising Islam. It could be used against them. It could be criticised. It could be used against ex-Muslims criticising the religion.
Quite possibly. I mean, it comes back to the actual definition itself. This APPG 2018 definition is not as bad as the 1997 definition, but it's still just not very good, and mostly it's just confusing.
Yeah. So it's dangerous times in terms of whether this thing does get put through or not. Do you think that people might protest if it went to that next level? Do you think that we would see this being the hill?
Well, I don't think we're likely to see protests in the streets unless they're organised by people who are genuinely anti-Muslim bigots. But I believe in good, clear thinking rather than muddy thinking, which is why I'm opposed to the definition.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree with you. Thank you so much for joining us, Mohammed Ami. Big round of applause, please. Thank you. Have a lovely Sunday evening. Next on Free Speech Nation, Tuesday marks the 10th anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, but is free speech still under attack? We'll see you in a second.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. It continues to remain unsettled across western parts of the Mediterranean, but fairly warm for the time of year. Drier further east. Dry for Madeira, though. Temperatures 18 Celsius on Monday, but you can see unsettled weather across Portugal, Spain, southern France into Italy. Temperatures on the cool side, but drier towards Greece and Cyprus and Turkey as well. But temperatures here nearer to average for the time of year, but some pleasant sunny spells. Staying warm in Madeira for the next few days as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Maria, potholes are the bane of everybody that uses the road, whether you're a car driver or a cyclist. As a cyclist, are even worse. How have we got into this situation where our roads are in such a bad state?
Well, part of it is to do with actually our climate. In somewhere like, say, Sweden, like the snow will fall on the ground, it will stay there for months. Whereas here we've got what's called a freeze-thaw climate, where the water comes down, then we might have a cold snap and it freezes, and the water within the pothole will then expand and make the pothole bigger. Then we might have a mild spell, and then that process repeats. So, we do actually need extra funding to acknowledge the fact that, we just live in a climate where we're sort of particularly vulnerable to potholes.
Why? I mean, the fact that this happens, these weather conditions happen, is no great surprise to anybody. Why has the problem been ignored for so long?
I think what's happened is we've had short-term funding. So it's like, oh, there's a pothole, let's patch it up. Oh, there's another one, let's patch it up. But the patches aren't actually really that strong, so then they break down again. So, really what we need is to have roads completely resurfaced, and then they'll just be pothole-free for a very long time. And that really is how funding should be. That's the direction funding should go in, as opposed to just sort of like dribs and drabs here and there.
Do you think this government are going to be good for the motorist, or is there indeed a war on the motorist still?
The different parties come in and they've all got different policies that they wheel out, then they cancel the policies, and then there's so much lack of transparency. Like, for example, with the pothole issue, sometimes the government, whichever government is in office, will do some big showboating about how they're going to give X amount of potholes, and you still think that sounds really good.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. This Tuesday marks the 10th anniversary of the attack on the satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo in Paris, which tragically claimed the lives of 12 people. 2 jihadist gunmen carried out the massacre after the paper's decision to repeatedly publish caricatures mocking the Prophet Muhammad. Ever defiant, the French satirical newspaper is set to publish a special God-mocking edition next week to mark 10 years since the shocking attack on the freedom of expression. We are joined now to talk about these seismic events by Education and Events Director of the Free Speech Union, Jan McVarish. Follow, please, now us into this conversation. Jan. I can't believe it's been 10 years since those events. It feels like a turning point in good ways and bad ways, maybe.
Yes, it's one of many attacks that we realise they just slide from our memory, really. And obviously, it was momentous, and there was a huge response at the time. Back in 2015, there was a huge rally in Paris with 40 leaders of 40 nations were present, and there was a kind of what looked like a fairly convincing pledge at the time with the "Je suis Charlie" motto or slogan that was adopted by people. People were putting it on their social media icons and that kind of thing, and it was on the streets as banners. But then very quickly we went back to where we had been prior to that, and there wasn't really a kind of material change that really meant that this couldn't happen again. And by November that year, there's the attack on the Bataclan music venue and on sports stadium and on cafes. Obviously not so much because of the same issue as Charlie Hebdo, but nevertheless with the same kind of perpetrators with the same ideology. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that hashtag and Je suis Charlie, but there was also almost an immediate backlash amongst certain parts of the left of sort of Je suis, je ne pas Charlie. And I remember there was a New Yorker piece at the time that kind of argued that they almost brought it upon themselves, they deserved it, rather than standing up and saying we should be able to say this. It was sort of almost arguing like, well, they're being racist, and that's what happens to racists. Yes, I think a lot of people just completely failed to understand what Charlie Hebdo was about as a magazine, or is about. It kept going. They failed to kill it, which is amazing, and they actually produced an edition the following week. So the surviving staff vowed that they would produce an edition the following week, and they did. And that was read by almost 8 million people worldwide, and it was translated into numerous languages. But yes, you're right, that there was a mealy-mouthed, ambivalent response and a straightforwardly critical response from various writers. Some cartoonists, Gary Trudeau, who does the Doonesbury cartoons, said that they verge on hate speech, and this was, not an acceptable way to use your speech and to use your pen. Various American writers boycotted an award ceremony where they had decided to award a posthumous award to the staff of Charlie Hebdo, and various American writers, well-known writers, boycotted that award. The Penn Award, yeah. It was the Penn Award, yeah. Extraordinary thing to do. But yeah, a misunderstanding, a caricature of Charlie Hebdo as a kind of right-wing, as racist, where there's the point of Charlie Hebdo has always been that it criticised everybody without any kind of respect. Yeah. No respect. Well, of course, because to say that, we're gonna criticise everybody, but we're not going to criticise these people as a sort of protected class, that would be arguably that would then be bigotry. Yes, well, that's right. And actually, it was always far more critical of the Catholic Church than it was of Islam. And this was what they had done previously, was to reproduce the Danish cartoons of Muhammad, which had already been a big controversy back in 2006. Their office had already been firebombed in 2011. So the office they were in when they were murdered was a hidden venue where they weren't supposed to be known that they were there. And so this goes back a long way. I mean, it goes all the way back to 1989, Salman Rushdie and the fatwa against him. So this is, and it goes forward. So we now have, or since the Charlie Hebdo massacre, we've then had incidents over here of numerous death threats against people who are accused of desecrating the Quran or of being Islamophobic. Or the teacher, the Batley teacher. Exactly. And then there's the boy in Wakefield who was accused of desecrating a text. Yeah. And that acquiescence is the problem. So you can have a small number of extremists. You only have a very small number of actual terrorists who are physically violent. Then you have people who will support it. Then you have people that are ambivalent, and then you have cowards. And what we need to do is to make sure that the vast majority of people cease to be cowards on this issue, I think.
Well, I wonder if, as I said, it being a turning point in that way, is it felt like a lot of people were sort of going behind, yes, of course, free speech. And then you, like you say, you saw this kind of the cowardice almost take over almost immediately, so that what we took, and this may be just my personal interpretation of the events, was what you took as a kind of for granted. Oh yes, we live in a free speech nation. Suddenly it was like, oh well, actually maybe we don't, because people aren't really, when it matters, willing to take a stand. Now, of course, since then we have TV shows like this, we have free speech unions set up. So that, I feel, is why that was almost like a turning point to get to this point. I believe there's an organisation on Tuesday, Our Fight, who are doing commemorating what happened. I think 10:15. If you live in London, at Trafalgar Square, and you want to take a stand for free speech, I'm gonna be there as well. 10:15, Trafalgar Square, because if there's anything we learned, that free speech is something that we actually have to fight for, right?
Yes, it's not just a principle. It's a practice. And when people practice it, we have to defend them. And that's what was going on through the whole of the cartoon affair, which is about testing the limits, making sure that there wasn't a reintroduction of blasphemy in Europe. And because of that, we end up with this massacre, a massacre of 12 people, which is absolutely extraordinary. And then following on from that was the massacre of 4 Jews in a kosher supermarket 2 days later, which was related. It was related to the Charlie Hebdo attack as well. So, these things we have to, at some point, we have to decide to stand firm. I think Tuesday's a really, really good initiative. I'll be there as representing the Free Speech Union. I think we're going to be at Nelson's column at 10:15 on Tuesday morning, so I would suggest that people come down to that if they possibly can.
Yeah. There's the tweet now that they put out the post. The issue of drawing a picture of Muhammad, obviously, within the religion of Islam, that is sacrosanct. You shouldn't do it, and certainly something that mocks him. But that's the point: is we live in the West now, so it seems like that one particular issue is something that divides whether we have actually genuine blasphemy laws in this country or not, or genuine free speech or not. Because if there are people who are willing to kill for it and people who are willing to support those people who kill for it, it doesn't feel like that's gone anywhere. In terms of the point that they were making 10 years ago still exists today, if not more so. Yes, and it's a divided issue amongst Muslims. Not all Muslims think the Prophet should not be portrayed, and also what you do about it. I mean, I'm fine you can accept that Muslims shouldn't portray the Prophet, but why on earth anybody else shouldn't conjure up an image of what they might? It's not even that the Charlie Hebdo people thought that they were representing Muhammad as Muhammad, because they didn't believe in Muhammad. Yeah. They just they're atheists. That was the point. Thank you so much for joining us, Jan McFarage, everybody. That is the end of the first hour of Free Speech Nation. Don't go away, we've got plenty more to come. Thank you very much.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It stays cold through the week ahead, overnight severe frosts and the continued risk of snow and ice at times too. Low pressure still in charge to end the weekend and into the beginning of next week, but it is pulling away, dragging in cold air still across many areas with wintry showers. But a cold end to Sunday, further rain and snow, particularly across northern England, southern Scotland. Warnings for snow and ice still here overnight. Heavy rain though pushing eastwards across southern and central parts of England and Wales. Again, a Met Office warning out here, could be some localised flooding. Temperatures below freezing across Northern Ireland, Scotland, some icy stretches holding up above freezing across southern parts to start Monday morning, but an unsettled start to the day. An icy start across Scotland, some disruption possible with wintry showers across the north, some clear spells across central parts, but quite frequent snow showers towards the Edinburgh area. Could be some tricky travelling conditions first thing. And across Northern Ireland, Northern England, wintry showers here, further snowfall, particularly over the higher ground. Snowing over the high ground of Wales as well, but elsewhere generally the precipitation falling as rain, fairly cloudy skies as we push through the day, and quite windy too through the day tomorrow. We see some gales around the coast, particularly in the east as the low pressure pulls away. Frequent showers still continuing here, falling as snow over the higher ground. Some icy stretches continuing, and temperatures on the cold side, perhaps 4 or 5 degrees at best, locally 6 or 7 in the far south to end the afternoon. And then a quick look at Tuesday, a cold, frosty, icy start once more. Met Office warnings likely to be issued as we get closer to the time, and a day of sunny spells and wintry showers across the country. Showers most frequent across the north and the west. The further risk of rain and snow heading towards the middle of the week across southern counties. Temperatures staying on the cold side. See you soon.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang. From treats to holidays to fun times with the family, a totally tax-free £50,000 in cash could make you feel alive in 2025. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On the 8th of October at Battersea Arts Centre, a new orchestra launched its inaugural season. The orchestra, which is named Chromatica, is formed of some of the best young musicians in Britain. They're due to perform in traditional venues and in community spaces. The aim is to bring their youth and dynamism to a wide repertoire of music. Predominantly, they'll work with emerging conductors who will have the chance to shape the orchestra and its repertoire. To share her experiences of bringing the ensemble together, I'm joined by the violinist and Chromatica Orchestra lead, Maren Bosma. To what extent is this novel? To what extent is this new ground?
Well, new ground, it is new ground in a sense that this is a completely new orchestra. Obviously, in the current sort of cultural climate, it's not really easy to set up a new orchestra. And so in that sense, it's a novelty for us to kind of try and carve out our space in the current climate of musical orchestras and musicians in Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's quite odd in a way to think of a new orchestra because the ones that we have tend to be struggling and numbers indeed have been reduced. I used to be associated with an orchestra which unfortunately went under. You've got some private backing for this.
Yeah.
Why do you think the private backers have been willing to give you support? What is it that they see as your unique selling proposition?
Well, Chromatica Orchestra essentially is an early career orchestra. So we're formed of all sort of top musicians who've graduated in, say, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Because everyone is of that generation, there is a sort of enthusiasm and dynamism that we bring to the stage I think is quite unique. The orchestra's mission, it's really focused on creating opportunities for young emerging musicians.
GB News, the People's Channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, but first, let's get a news update from Tatiana Sanchez.
Josh, thank you very much. And we start this news bulletin with some breaking news that former RuPaul's Drag Race UK winner, James Lee William, known as the Vivian, has died at the age of 32. In a statement, a spokesperson said James was an incredibly loved, warm-hearted and amazing person. The Vivian had risen to prominence in 2015 after becoming the UK drag ambassador for the American series of the Drag Race. The show sees drag queens competing in front of a panel of judges to become the next drag superstar. The Vivian later competed in the first UK series of the show in 2019. Another's top story today, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has responded after Elon Musk said he doesn't have what it takes to lead the party. Farage said, well, this is a surprise. Elon is a remarkable individual, but I'm afraid on this I disagree. My view remains that Tommy Robinson is not right for reform and I never sell out my principles. Well, that's after Musk posted on X saying the Reform UK party needs a new leader. This apparent turn comes just a few weeks after Nigel Farage travelled to Florida to meet with Musk about possible funding for his party. It also comes less than 24 hours after Farage said there was no question on Musk supporting him personally. Elon's father, Errol Musk, spoke to Nana Akweer.
Friday the 3rd, I spoke on your channel, and as it happened, I said that, in my opinion, this was before these tweets. In my opinion, Farage is not strong enough to be the leader of the UK. I can see that. It's quite clear to me. He speaks sense, but he doesn't have the strength for that, in my opinion. And subsequently now we've had this tweet from Elon, and I haven't spoken to Elon, but I agree. I completely agree with him.
Elsewhere, heavy snow has caused travel disruption in the UK as weather warnings remain in place. And despite the Leeds Bradford Airport runway reopening earlier this afternoon, no plane is yet to land there. The Met Office had issued 2 amber weather warnings for England and Wales, forecasting 3 to 7 centimetres of snow in some areas. A number of flood warnings are also in place across South England. There are also more than 200 flood alerts, which deem flooding possible in several areas of England and Wales. The UK Health Security Agency has issued cold weather health alerts, which remain in place for all of England. And finally, GB News can exclusively reveal that the Prime Minister ignored a Rotherham whistleblower, Jane Senior's bullying complaint after she exposed child abuse and corruption while he was leader of the opposition in 2020. GB News national reporter Charlie Peter has the details.
We've seen correspondence sent by Sir Keir Starmer's office that simply says, unfortunately, we won't be able to facilitate a meeting. Oh, but here is an online form for processing complaints. But fundamentally, I think what we've seen as a political reaction to this story with both Kemi Badenoch from the Conservatives and Rupert Lowe from Reform and plenty of other commentators as well, they're all saying that, well, Jane Senior did have that national hero status. She was being bullied. Why didn't you take the time to meet with her, especially considering the reputation and fear that people had around the Labour Party and the CSE scandal and all the cover-ups?
And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It is time now for some more questions from our lovely studio audience. Our first question is from John.
Okay. Well, it's very apt because the programme is called Free Speech Nation, but the question is, are our free speech laws fit for purpose?
Indeed, well, yes. So this is thousands have been arrested for grossly offensive comments. That means is the UK's free speech laws an embarrassment to our so-called liberal democracy? For decades, British police have been doing their utmost to police hate. Thousands have been arrested, and those who share unpleasant memes are often treated more harshly than those who commit serious crimes. The state is also taking interest in policing what is and isn't true. How did a supposedly free nation like Britain become so preoccupied with punishing people for things that they think and say? John, what do you think about this? If you don't mind standing up and...
OK, well, I think the laws are not fit for purpose. I think basically a lot of people in the UK are probably afraid to say what they really think. And that doesn't help if you want to have a democracy that works. So I think at the moment they need to look at it and make things a lot more sort of easier for people to actually express their opinions in a proper forum, say.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, Adam, you just come from America, and a lot of this is from a recent interview with an American looking at our free speech laws and pointing out, incredibly, that there are more arrests in the UK from 2015-16 over speech issues than there were in the Red Scare in America, in the first Red Scare in 1919.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, if I may, I'll tell you about a little story that happened while I was in America. So I was over there.
You may.
Thank you, Josh. I was over there, as you know, I was over there in Austin with my friend Jonathan Cogan, a very funny comedian as well. And he's at the back, he's doing the show. Anyway, what was interesting about this was the fact that this news and this realisation of the UK no longer being a champion of free speech has permeated, and everybody in America seems to know. We were sitting in the mothership in Austin, Joe Rogan's Comedy Club, and these two Americans, about the same age as us, maybe a little bit older, had bought us drinks. They were like, "Oh, you know, it's so nice to have you. Thank you for coming visiting our country." And he says, "I've got to ask you, is it?" Sorry for the terrible Mississippi accent. He sort of said, "Is the UK really locking people up for free speech, for tweets?" And I had to just sit there and just go, "Unfortunately, yes, we are." And he goes, "Well, that's crazy, man. We would never let that happen over here in America." And it was a very interesting thing, being perceived by other people from what was a free country. And I had to sit back and go, it's horrible, the fact that this is happening. And I kind of felt ashamed a little bit for the first time of where our country's going in that sort of sense. And yeah, it was...
And it's a long time coming, isn't it? I mean, this is the point that's been made, is it's actually been part of this movement now for sort of 20, 30 years. The analogy would be lobsters in a pan.
Yeah.
Where it gets to this point where outsiders now look at us and go, look at those lobsters all frying to death, and we haven't really noticed it.
We seem to look at free speech through the prism, a very punitive prism, in the sense that you talk to people who don't think about this on a regular basis like us here, and they'll immediately talk about it doesn't mean you're free of consequences if you have something to say, which is immediately swivelling it around and saying, you better be careful what you say, because if you get this wrong, we as a society will punish you.
Also, don't offend anybody.
Exactly, which is the least important thing in the world, by the way. We need to readjust this slightly and have it so that, as you say, people can be offended. I was offended. OK, talk to me about it. It doesn't mean we have to care. It doesn't mean you're right. And also, some things aren't nice and pleasant to hear, but you need to hear them. If they're not going away, they're just not going away.
That's exactly it. It's our tolerance, I think, as society, to hear unpleasant things. Yeah. For example, Adam, that jacket is disgusting. I don't know how... are you OK? Do you feel like you've been...
I feel younger than you.
Now I'm hurt and triggered by this thing. But that's the point, is that nowadays we're not used anymore to hearing. We've sort of become so encased within these bubbles that actually there's this idea that when that happens, that actually pushes you down a more extreme route. So that when you hear anything counter to that, it is almost like you're being attacked.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to sort of labour the point too much, but I've seen this in other completely different industries. I mean, years ago, before I even started stand-up, I was working as a teaching assistant, and I remember I was working through the maths modules, helping market with the teachers. And at the time, they gave there was two pens. There was a green pen and a blue pen, and I was told, oh, if they get a question wrong in maths, you couldn't put a cross because that was seen as too aggressive. You had to circle it with a blue pen, and I just thought, oh, that's changed. And I think as a nation, we've become too soft. You know, it's that idea of everybody gets a participation trophy just for trying, rather than just giving it to the winners, and the people who didn't win realising, OK, in this instance, you weren't as good enough. So there's a huge softening, I think.
Adam, I'm going to give that comment a big tick. Good for you. Our next question is from Anton. Hey, Anton.
Is it right for our Prime Minister to skip queues in social situations?
Yes. So Prime Minister Keir Starmer sidestepped a massive queue for a toboggan ride during a winter holiday in Madeira. The Labour leader was escorted to the front of the line ahead of others who had waited up to 3 hours for their turn, with someone yelling at Sir Keir Starmer to get to the back of the queue as he, his wife and his two teenage children were ushered ahead by security. What do you think about this, Anton? Pushing in queues. Oh.
It's pushing it a bit too much.
Oh, OK. I'm going to give that a big cross.
A blue circle, please.
Yeah, a big circle. Nice effort. Thank you, Anton. Paul, what do you think about this? I mean, this is the definitive... I mean, does it come down to this in Portugal, who was actually queuing? Because if it was Portuguese people... That's fine, isn't it, to push past them?
I did hear that heckler has now been sentenced to 2 years in prison, so we probably should
hurt their feelings.
Exactly. Look, this is really difficult. The other night I did headliners, humble brag, Friday night, and I really laid into Keir Starmer about this because I just spent, the last 20 minutes talking about the gangs, and I was filled with emotion. Of course, in retrospect, I look back at that, a bit more cool-headed and think, well, as Prime Minister, he's going to be offered that by the authorities of Madeira anyway, and he's probably going to take it.
Yeah, because it's bad for security purposes. You don't want the Prime Minister just standing in one spot for 3 hours.
I would say the optics, however, which he can't control. He could do to some degree. He could say, no, I'll just wait. But, I don't think he will because of security reasons. The optics are terrible against the backdrop of everything that's going on at the moment. It just feels like each day Keir Starmer looks weaker.
I mean, I don't know if it's putting it within that context, to be honest. I think people feel very strongly... We saw what happened with the people queuing up for the Queen and the Queen's... after she died and had the Hollygate or whatever it was called. People really don't like people pushing in queues.
Yeah, I agree, Josh. But my pushback to that would be just get over it. Celebrities pushing queues all the time. I'd be weirder if he was like, instead of dealing with the country, he was, in Thorpe Park queuing for hours and end.
Like Ed Davey.
Yeah, Ed Davey. But the thing is, let me put it this way: if he was there with his wife and his 2 kids, if it was Keir Starmer as a fully grown man by himself, then he should stay in the queue. Stay in the queue for as long as you want. If you need the kids, let him go through. That's not the issue. I mean, there's a lot of issues I have with Keir Starmer. Jumping in front of the queue with your kids to get on a ride. As somebody who's leading the country, not one of them.
Yeah, and also he could be using those other 3 hours to, do really good stuff for the country.
Yeah. You'd hope so.
OK, our next question is from Chris.
So, is it right that the teacher should lose his job who allegedly said inappropriate things to children, including allegedly saying to one child, "You're a fat slug"?
OK, well, I think they should say alleged, because I don't know if that is actually 100% true. Only that the part I read of the story is that a former head teacher described children as a fat slug rather than to them directly as and ugly, and they have escaped a ban from teaching. And this is Nicola Brogan made derogatory remarks about children, parents, and teachers in messages and in person to other people about those other people, leading to a negative and hostile culture among the staff. And a teaching regulation agency conduct panel, they were told it, but they have ruled that her actions amounted to unacceptable professional conduct, but did not recommend a prohibition order which would have banned her from teaching. Yeah, Paul, I mean, this kind of annoys me because this is what... Having WhatsApp groups and be able to sort of say horrible things about people in privacy with the other people who you work with doesn't seem like such a big deal. They're not going up to a kid and saying, "You're fat." That's different.
Fat slug.
Yeah, I know it's different. This is WhatsApp groups, OK, and it goes on with it was WhatsApp groups within the professional context. It was with other senior teachers, and I think maybe some PTA members of that particular school. She said some really based stuff. she proper... I mean, you can't read out.
I want to work for her, to be honest.
She said some pretty nasty stuff about some of the people around her and some of the children. It seems like a quite... relative type response to WhatsApp. It's nice to see that she hasn't lost her job, from my perspective, because I've sat here many a time and said, we should be able to have free speech and there should be less cancel culture. So I'm actually glad she hasn't.
Yeah, because she's been at the school, she had been at the school, she doesn't work there anymore, but she's been there for 8 years. She got them out of special measures, so it seems like, as this panel point out, she was very good at her job.
Yes.
Also... it's like you say stuff in private. Look, again, going back to that point, saying it to kids directly is one thing, but teaching's hard. We have gallows humour. These things that happen in these private groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't find...
You're a teacher, right? You worked...
I worked as a teaching assistant with children with special educational needs, and let me tell you, they are the fattest slugs. No, no, but it's, in all seriousness, it's something... If it was done directed at the children directly, unacceptable, should lose a job. That's, it's really nasty. Letting off steam in a WhatsApp shoot, maybe you could argue it wasn't the best use of best judgment. But I think just we should all be aware that you should be acting a bit more, professionally. But yes, you shouldn't lose your job. But yeah, not the best behaviour.
Yeah, why did you lose your job again? Anyway, so our final question is from Jason.
Hello. Are universities embarrassed by white people?
Are universities embarrassed by white people? Degree courses focused on the undertakings of white people have made universities racist, according to a review by a Russell Group institution. The University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent undertook a joint review of their connections to the slave trade and set out how these have created a legacy of racism at the institutions. They pledged to make slavery reparations as a result of their review, which found that the university's racially unbalanced curriculum ignores the equally significant efforts of people of African descent. This seems... I'm reading this article, it was mental, because, and it should be pointed out, they're talking about this history of racism and how some of the money that they had been given, and you're sort of reading, oh, it's coming from slavery, and then you realise it's from someone who died in 1977. Like, that's how recent it was. And that means somehow they have this background in slavery. It's ridiculous.
Time and time again, all this anti-racism stuff seems to perpetuate is anti-white racism or anything that isn't person of colour. So if you're not a person of colour in the academics' eyes, in this particular case, then you are in some way bad, and we should forget that. We've learned all history from your perspective. That needs to be forgotten, and we need to do it from this perspective now. That shuts out a lot of babies with a lot of bathwater, and we need to accept that white people did some good things and are worth learning from.
Yeah, but, well, exactly. And when you're at universities, to just kind of focus on... We've got a topic coming up soon, similar, but about our secondary schools.
Yeah.
But this kind of stuff is just like... I mean, I know they probably commissioned it right in the Black Lives Matter, and now they've finally reported. They've sort of got all the money that they could out of it, and now, like, here's the report. Is it going to get acted on?
Yeah, you'd hope not. I mean, I'm in two minds about this. The first position I guess is you want universities to focus on nothing else other than making sure the students are basically learning and educated to the highest abilities, which will then lead them to get into maybe the best jobs and contributing to the economy. You also don't want them to feel like we're in a divided society. The second part, the other side is, I feel like if these universities are insisting in doing these things, and I guess it's not going to be for engineering, is it? It's going to be for the wishy-washy subjects, of which I did. I did film and theatre studies. It was a ridiculous degree. I wouldn't recommend anyone do it because it gave me no real prospects other than this, which I'm very happy to be on. But I do think that in those scenarios, anyone who's thinking about going to university, just maybe do your research. And if your university is one of these ones affected and the course you're thinking about studying might be infected with this sort of new wave, vote with your wallet and don't... Because you're paying for these, you're funding these guys, just don't go to them, and then they will die out. That would be my recommendation.
OK, there we go. No one go to university.
To do the wishy-washy subjects.
To do the wishy-washy stuff. Right.
Don't do it.
OK, next on Free Speech Nation, as Labour's plans to rip up the curriculum and decolonise subjects in Britain's schools, are we putting our kids at risk of indoctrination in the classroom? Head of Education at the Centre for Policy Studies, Mark Lehane, reveals all after the break.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Today I am joined by documentary maker Daniel Wing, who is still trying to find out who murdered his mother 30 years on. He's also created a documentary called Who Murdered You, Mum? Daniel, can you just tell us the story of what happened to your mother, what you know?
So when I was 1 year old in 1992, my mum, Tina, was murdered. My dad went on trial for it and was acquitted. And the case went unsolved and has been unsolved for 32 years. My nan, who raised me, amazing woman, passed away sadly 2 years ago, and that kind of sent me on a quest for answers.
So your documentary then, what are you hoping to achieve with it?
I am fighting for justice for my mum. I have had a meeting with the police and they are looking to see what they have and are looking to reopen investigation if they can find new and compelling evidence. What's interesting now is speaking to other families who are actually going through the trauma and experience of murder.
Yeah.
My mum didn't get the opportunity to be a mum. What would my life have been? I'm now 33 years old with no parents. And it's that kind of thing. It's a very, I guess, lonely journey in what I'm experiencing. That's why I wanted to make this film, because I hadn't had the opportunity to be able to grieve my mother and know who she was. And that was really what this journey was about. It was about finding out who she was and being able to grieve. Everyone had the opportunity, although terrible circumstances, to be able to go to the funeral and have that moment, and I never had that opportunity.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Concerns have been raised as the first details have emerged concerning Labour's review of the English school curriculum announced by the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson just days after taking office in July. The Department for Education's terms of reference for the review, revealed by The Telegraph last week, state that the updated curriculum should refresh what is taught in England's schools. With this, Phillipson wants to breathe new life into the outdated curriculum. Our proposals, including calls to decolonise subjects, branded monocultural. Teaching unions are calling for subjects like English literature to be less traditional and more diverse. I'm not even sure what that means. Does that mean replace English with French? I don't know. I'm delighted to welcome the executive head teacher of the Wootton Academy Trust, Mark Lehane. Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
This is what governments do. This is nothing new. They come into power and they go, we're going to change the education curriculum. Arguably, one of the better things that the Tory government did was with education, wasn't it?
Yeah, and obviously I'm biased because up until the election, for a few years, I was a special advisor in the Department for Education. But most importantly, I've been a teacher on and off since 2003. I'm a third-generation teacher, and genuinely schools are a whole lot better now than they were 30 years ago. It's been progress over a number of different governments. And I guess the key thing I'd be saying to the audience and to viewers at home is, if you were to ask science teachers, do you think we should add more stuff into the curriculum, they'd laugh at you, because talk to a science teacher, it's jam-packed, the chemistry, biology, physics curriculum. There's almost too much in there. We need to take stuff out, not add stuff into it. But the other thing I would say is to reassure people is what we're hearing at the moment is what different organisations are proposing the government should do to the curriculum. Bridget Phillipson and her team haven't decided yet. They've got a group of experts, some from schools, some from teacher training places, some from universities, looking at what should go in there. So the big decision is still to be made. What should go in and what should come out.
But
so we've got to watch this space.
Experts are... There could be the argument that some of them are ideologically driven. The person who I believe is leading the project herself criticised Blair's government as focusing too much on exam results or academic excellence or something like that, which is surely that's the purpose of teaching, is to get those results.
No, absolutely is, but there's also some really great people on that group of experts they've got, and I happen to know some of them because of the work I've done in the last few years. So I think we just have to wait and see what they do first. But there's another really important thing that people need to know about what's going to happen after this review. In parallel, the government are going to introduce a new law. They're going to introduce a bill to Parliament this Wednesday that, for the very first time since the national curriculum was introduced, it will be compulsory for every single state school to follow it. So at the moment, academies and free schools, schools that are funded by the government but are run by charitable trusts like my own or the one I set up back in Bedford a few years ago, if they want to divert from the national curriculum, they can do that. That's fine. For the first time ever, once this law is passed, every single state school will have to follow the national curriculum. So whatever Bridget Phillipson and her team decide is going to be in science, is going to be in maths and English, we will all have to follow it. There will be no variation, there'll be no way of escaping it, unless you've got the money to go private.
So why are the government pushing through this bill then?
Well, they would argue it's about levelling up, it's about making sure there is a minimum standard in every school. People like myself that work in the system or have worked around the system for years can see the benefits we've had for over 30 years of having that flexibility. But what I would say is they were democratically elected. They've got the right to do this. The question is whether they should be doing it and whether they're going to do the right things.
Yeah, I mean, it might not impact that many people. My children actually do go to a free school. Part of the attraction of sending them to that school was the fluidity of the curriculum, in that there was some level of control in terms of what they would learn and focus on. And if I was unhappy with that, I could then change schools. But now it seems like those options are now gone.
That's right. They're going to take that away, that freedom away, along with the freedom as a head teacher in terms of, because I run an academy trust, I can employ people on different contracts in terms of conditions, and I can employ different kinds of people that might not have the usual qualifications. I also opened a free school. I was very lucky in Bedford. I opened Bedford Free School in 2012. One of the joys of that was being able to create a curriculum from scratch that was full of what we considered to be the very best stuff kids could and should learn. Mm-hmm. And we will, once this law has been passed, remove the right to do that.
Yeah. Reading, I agree that that's a huge story. I just want to get back to this particular point of it, though, is that when I read this article, and it was, I think, in the Telegraph originally, they talked about the Royal Society of Biology, the Royal Statistical Society, the Institute of Physics. It read to me like these organisations devoted to science were institutionally captured. The rubbish that they were all pointing out, like, this is what we're going to now talk about, this is what we're going to focus on, rather than the basics of science, which they were set up to promote. It was like, wow, I can't believe this is still happening.
No, but let's be honest. Is it a big surprise that these institutions that aren't on the front line have been captured by some of these ideas? Not really. Most of academia has already been captured by, woke ideas, or call them what you like. The really interesting thing is when you get into schools, when you talk to people that are actually working with kids and are actually thinking hard about what to teach them, that's not what they're interested in. It's the same with the teaching unions, I'm afraid. Like, there are very good reasons why teachers want to be in a union, but when you listen to what the trade unions are saying about what schools should do, it's completely disconnected to what most teachers would say, whether it's about behaviour or what you teach and so on.
But that's the danger, isn't it? That you have, for example, the trade unions, they do have a voice in this process.
Yeah.
And arguably those voices may influence in a negative way our children's education.
Yeah, at the moment it's really clear. If you're a parent and you've got a question about why your child is being taught something or how we're doing something, it's really clear who you talk to. You come and talk to me because it's my decision. Once this law's been changed and the national curriculum's been updated, I'll be saying, sorry, it's not my choice. So it's down to the government.
What can sort of normal human beings do when we want to have some kind of say in what our children or how their education or what they're taught? Apart from voting in a different government.
So the call for evidence that the government put out in terms of this review about what should go in, that's closed now, and the expert group and ministers will be working through that. There'll be a lot of civil servants working on it as well. So our chance to submit ideas as to what should go in or come out that's passed. Mm-hmm. I think what we've got to do is let that process run now. But alongside that bill is only going to be introduced into Parliament on Wednesday. We need to be encouraging our MPs to look really closely at what powers the government are taking, which they've never had before. And we need to be lobbying our MPs and our other representatives to try and do the best thing by that.
Because we've seen that when you just kind of trust people to just get in, even with the best of intentions, of course, then you have ideologies put through the school system, and in my case, in terms of gender ideology, trans ideology, taught to our kids, and you just assume that it wouldn't happen, and suddenly your kids are coming home and saying, there are 100 sexes, Daddy. That's something that genuinely happened to me.
Yeah, and I think whilst we can trust most people working with young people to want to do the right thing, you're always going to need fallbacks. You're always going to need safety nets, aren't you, to try and protect them. But in terms of the curriculum, as you said already, one of the protections we've had until now is that if a school wasn't doing something you're happy with, as a parent, you could go and talk to the head or the teachers to see why. Now we'll largely be delivering what politicians have decided. Listen, they won the election. It's hard for someone like me to accept this because I really love the fact that we can design the curriculum from scratch. But they legitimately won the election. They were very clear well before the election that if they got in, they would change the law to do this, and it's exactly what they're doing. So we need to think hard about how we make the best of it.
I guess we're going to be revisiting this story as
it's going to run and run.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much. Mark Lehane, thank you very much for coming in. Next on Free Speech Nation, after the grooming gang scandal rocked Westminster and shocked the world over the course of this week, with even Elon Musk wading in, I'm joined in the studio by a man who has done more than most to expose the decades of abuse. GB News' very own Charlie Peters. See you in a second. You don't want to miss it.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It stays cold through the week ahead, overnight severe frosts and the continued risk of snow and ice at times too. Low pressure still in charge to end the weekend and into the beginning of next week, but it is pulling away, dragging in cold air still across many areas with wintry showers. But a cold end to Sunday, further rain and snow, particularly across northern England, southern Scotland. Warnings for snow and ice still here overnight. Heavy rain though pushing eastwards across southern and central parts of England and Wales. Again, a Met Office warning out here, could be some localised flooding. Temperatures below freezing across Northern Ireland, Scotland, some icy stretches holding up above freezing across southern parts to start Monday morning, but an unsettled start to the day. An icy start across Scotland, some disruption possible with wintry showers across the north, some clear spells across central parts, but quite frequent snow showers towards the Edinburgh area. Could be some tricky travelling conditions first thing. And across Northern Ireland, Northern England, wintry showers here, further snowfall, particularly over the higher ground. Snowing over the high ground of Wales as well, but elsewhere generally the precipitation falling as rain, fairly cloudy skies as we push through the day, and quite windy too through the day tomorrow. We'll see some gales around the coast, particularly in the east as the low pressure pulls away. Frequent showers still continuing here, falling as snow over the higher ground, some icy stretches continuing, and temperatures on the cold side, perhaps 4 or 5 degrees at best, locally 6 or 7 in the far south to end the afternoon. And then a quick look at Tuesday, a cold, frosty, icy start once more. Met Office warnings likely to be issued as we get closer to the time, and a day of sunny spells and wintry showers across the country. Showers most frequent across the north and the west. The further risk of rain and snow heading towards the middle of the week across southern counties. Temperatures staying on the cold side. See you soon.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. The grooming gang scandal has affected British communities for decades, but has made international headlines this week after the Labour government rejected calls for a national inquiry. GB News reporter Charlie Peters has, for years now, been at the forefront of exposing these vile gangs and the authorities who appear to have swept the scandal under the rug for as long as they possibly could. And Charlie Peters joins us right now in the studio after a week where even Elon Musk has been highlighting his work. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's just go through what has happened this week.
Sure. OK, so on Tuesday, which was New Year's Eve, I saw there's quite a lot of discussion on X, online, about the grooming gang scandal again. Every now and again this happens where online discussion surges again as people discover this appalling atrocity. By any measure, I think possibly the worst scandal in modern British history. And Elon Musk also tweeted about it. He saw a post from a court transcript, something very shocking from an Oxford case in 2013, which most people just hadn't seen. The details are so horrendous, and it's a real travesty what happened there, that often those bits of information are sort of kept out of the spotlight. But when it did come forward, I realised that I really had to release a story I'd had prepared for some time, which was that Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, had denied a request from Oldham Council for an independent inquiry into the grooming gang scandal in the town. She was asked in July, she was asked again in October. She finally replied almost 4 months later. I acquired a copy of that letter, and when I broke that story on New Year's Day, I thought, like many of the exclusives we've done at GB News on this scandal, it would get some traction, some people would talk about it, the usual politicians who do care would step up, campaigners would speak, but this time was very different. It went like wildfire, and the richest man in the world shared it, and that very quickly led to a lot of attention coming forward very urgently. In particular, Kemi Badenoch, from the leader of the Conservative Party, calling for a national inquiry, Reform doing the same, the government not putting forward anyone from the Home Office for a response at the time, no ministers from the Home Office, just a bit of sort of briefing between ministers, and the conversation spiralled from there. And so much attention is now poured into this travesty, and people are asking, how has it gone on for so long, but we've still got people denying requests for reviews? Why was this national appalling situation never uncovered in the way that it is being done now? And what's going to happen next? And that's the conversation and the question we're hoping to answer.
Well, this is it. I mean, you also put out a thread which was quite a sort of calm, measured thread explaining how we got to this point. And I think when you're reading the original post that actually sparked all of this and the horrific details, but also reading your thread, and it just felt to me like just missed opportunity after missed opportunity. And I guess the question for us and the focus of this show is, was free speech or the denial of free speech or part of why this never took off when it really should have taken off 20 years ago, or when it was really first uncovered?
Yeah, first reports of this sort of abuse of on-street grooming from gangs appeared really in the 1970s. I've seen newspaper clippings from the Rotherham Advertiser in the early part of the 70s, but it didn't really appear as a political discussion until the early 2000s, when the Labour MP for Keighley, Anne Cryer, raised concerns about, in her words, Asian men targeting white girls. But she was immediately derided as a racist by members of her own party. You can't say that, was essentially what she was told. This atrocity of cover-up was widespread. It went on, and the effect of the silencing on Anne Cryer was so severe that nobody else really popped their head above the parapet until other people in sort of like the right-wing media or the far-right political space, as it was known then, such as the BNP, were talking about it. It became owned only by that group because nobody else wanted to talk about it. That was broken, really, by Andrew Norfolk, the incredible reporter from The Times, who was aware of this, but at the time didn't want to talk about it because he felt that it was a dream story for in his words, the far right. He couldn't imagine that it was actually true. He thought it was so sensationalised. But then he looked through court records in 2010 after hearing a radio report from Manchester while he was driving away for a long weekend and got stuck in. The Times gave him a couple of years to cover this story. In 2012, that newspaper did some extraordinary reports in Rotherham, which led to the 2014 J report. And since then, the world has woken up to that appalling situation, but it's always been localised. We've had great journalism in Telford, more of the same in Rochdale, individual gangs being reported on, but we've never really had an effort to do it as a national assessment, which is what I wanted to do with GB News when I joined here 3 years ago, to look at this as not sort of isolated to some northern mill towns. This is a problem all the way from Cornwall and Bristol up to Glasgow. Now, we collated and assessed reports from up to 50 different towns when we put together our documentary 2 years ago. And we also looked through the statistics on a national level to cut right to the heart of what was causing so much of the censorship, which was concerns about ethnicity data, concerns about who were behind the majority of these gangs and who were most of the victims, predominantly Pakistani men, predominantly white working class girls. That disparity forced people to shut up because whenever it was raised, they were bullied for doing so. They made an example of Anne Cryer, and everybody else who tried after was destroyed, even after the 2014 J report. Now, Sarah Champion in 2014, Labour MP for Rotherham. She was removed from the Labour front bench because she dared to speak out on the ethnicity issue. Jack Straw, 2011, another Labour MP. He said that we had a problem with Asian men treating white girls like meat. Again, he was roundly criticised for doing so. It's taken a long time now for people to actually embrace the reality on this situation. And I'm afraid to say it's taken foreign influence of a man like Elon Musk to actually reforce the conversation in the way it needs to be, and actually to get the survivors heard about what's happened to them and take away all of that political correctness that's stifled discussion for so long.
Well, that's what it is. We have these moments of bravery, individuals acting bravely, and then shut down, and then cowardice sets in, sometimes as having someone from outside to see the craziness, the horror of this situation and to call attention to it. I guess that then allows us to go, well, wait a minute, how hasn't there been a national inquiry into this matter?
Right, and at the moment, the government is defending its position, saying we've already had a national inquiry. They've pointed to the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Wes Streeting was in the broadcast round this morning making that argument. The fact of the matter is, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse never considered a specialist section on-street grooming gangs. There are over 50 different towns, and all we've got is these localised reports. Rotherham is mentioned just once in 400 pages of the ICSA report.
Why do you think that is? I mean, do you think that was a deliberate obfuscation? Because I remember when that report came out and they were like, oh, look, the majority of groomers are actually white, and it felt like it was almost created to push away from the focus on what had happened in these towns.
No one has ever been able to tell me why the ICSA report chose to investigate the towns it did. For background, it chose to look at 6 towns for its section on-street grooming. None of them were towns where there were previous reports of grooming gangs. They picked St Helens in Merseyside, for example, as one of them. Warwick as well. I mean, Bristol, there was some reports there. Again, they got one example from that. But when we have so many towns, dozens of towns and cities where we've seen credible reports, where we've seen this problem going on, why did they pick those towns? And why was there no specialist effort to research this issue? I don't think it's good enough for politicians to say, we've already had a national inquiry. That inquiry, if I'm frank, no, I'm a reporter, not a commentator, but that inquiry was a sham, OK? It did not get anywhere close to what survivors needed to assess this national crisis. And that's what I've heard over and over again from survivors I've spoken to, many of them from towns where there's been no effort to look into this. Like we said, we've had some local reports, Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, but it took years for them to be launched. OK, there are so many other places where survivors are saying, this is going on, it's still going on. The National Grooming Gangs Task Force that was launched in 2023 after our documentary called for it, it made over 500 arrests in its first year. This issue has never properly been investigated. There's never been a proper inquiry. There have never been proper efforts to stamp it out. Maybe now, though, that will change.
Well, not just, in terms of stamping out, that's got to be primary focus now to stop it where it's going on still, but also to have real justice for the women who this happened to, and also some accountability for those who actually did take an active step in withholding this. I understand that no policeman, no politician has even lost their job on this matter.
A few people resigned when the information was first revealed in Rotherham, in particular, in 2014. The whole council cabinet was removed after a further report in 2015 exposed the extent of the cover-up. But since then, it's been pretty thin pickings in terms of accountability. Last year, 2 years ago, now it's 2025, 2 years ago, 9 Rotherham councillors were deselected as a consequence of GBNews reporting exposing that they'd attended a meeting in 2005 which explained what was going on in South Yorkshire at the time. They knew what was going on, they didn't do anything. They were part of that culture of silence and distraction. But still, in 2023, they were still in their posts. They were quietly deselected before the next elections. But apart from that, there have been very few instances of proper accountability. No police officers in Rotherham were ever sacked over this scandal, despite the Independent Office of Police Conduct having their longest-running investigation into Rotherham, longer than the Hillsborough inquiry. 0 police officers. There are senior officers I know of, OK, from loads of police forces in the country who failed on this. South Yorkshire Police, West Yorkshire Police, Greater Manchester Police. Many of them have moved into senior positions around the country. Many of them have retired. This is a decades-old scandal. A lot of survivors fear that this is going to be a delayed reaction, even more than it already has been, which is going to mean that many of the people behind this appalling atrocity will never, ever be held accountable for what they did and what they failed to do.
You're going on tour now, so this ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, we've got to make the most of this momentum now, I think. And we also need to bring this conversation back to the survivors, because the last day, I have to say, I've been pretty concerned about how much conversation there's been about reform and Elon Musk and all the rest of it. It's helpful that he's kickstarted this conversation, but we need to bring it back to the experience of survivors and what they want. So this whole week, GB News will be across the country covering the grooming gang scandal. Tomorrow morning I'll be in Oldham, but we won't stop there. We'll be going to many other towns and cities where this appalling situation has taken place. We'll be speaking to survivors and we'll be revealing new details of what's been missed and what is still going on. We'll be speaking to victims, their families and campaigners who are all trying to find a solution and desperately hunting for the action that's needed on this appalling stain in British history.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Charlie Peters. Next on Free Speech Nation, we'll ask tonight's live studio audience what they've made of tonight's show, what they agree with, disagree with, what have they learned. We'll find out in 3 short minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
After a wet few days across some parts of Spain and Portugal, it is going to become drier. However, rain will arrive across parts of Italy and Greece. A dry picture for the Canary Islands and Madeira as well. Plenty of sunny spells. Similar picture across southern parts of Spain and Portugal. However, parts of Italy stretching across to Greece and perhaps Turkey as well. Increasing cloud here, some outbreaks of rain, feeling cooler as well. The outlook, though, is for it to become much drier and sunnier.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Joining me now is food historian and author of Christmas with Dickens, Pen Vogler. Pen, let's start with Christmas Carol. Did A Christmas Carol change Britain's view of Christmas?
I think it did, enormously. Before then, people were beginning to think, as they do now, that Christmas might be being a little bit commercial. It was too much food and drink, not enough kind of seriousness or not enough kind of love and family. And what Dickens did with A Christmas Carol was show people who were coming to the cities, who were kind of losing their rural history, a new way of celebrating Christmas, that a real, just a family could get together and love and kind of get around the table together. And whereas before, a lot of those kind of Christmas dishes would have been seasonal, lots of people would have eaten them at different times of the year, Dickens does 2 things. He takes the goose, which is what the Cratchits are going to eat, and he turns it to a turkey, much bigger, meatier, kind of more generous. And then he takes this thing that he never calls Christmas pudding in A Christmas Carol. There's no Christmas pudding. He only calls it plum pudding, and he anchors it to that day. And interestingly, after then, people start publishing recipes for Christmas pudding, and it starts getting its name, Christmas pudding, from plum pudding. And I think all of that really comes from A Christmas Carol.
You say becomes a Christmas pudding almost immediately after A Christmas Carol is published?
Yes, I mean, it's occasionally called Christmas pudding before, but not often. And then a very famous for the time, the kind of Delia Smith of her day, lady called Eliza Acton, publishes a recipe called The Author's Christmas Pudding in 1845. And we know she's a big Dickens fan because she sent a copy of her cookbook to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It's time now for our new segment of the show where we'll ask our lovely studio audience to share their thoughts on tonight's programme. What they liked, what they learned. Let's find out. We're going to start with Chris.
Well, I have a question. It's regards trans police officers. Now, I'm all for that because I'm all for inclusivity. I've said that right. But we are still in a situation, aren't we? And where on your birth certificate you have to be registered as male or female. Correct me if I'm wrong. So surely a warrant card of a police officer should follow whatever on your birth certificate. I'm not saying you should be able to change it, but surely you should be able to, like what's on your birth certificate, but surely you shouldn't have two warrant cards because, for example, the rules on stop and search, men searching men, women searching women. What happens to them rules if police officers have got both? What changing rooms do they use in the police station, etc.?
Well, absolutely, thank you, Chris. So this is the crux of the story, really, is that it allows for abuse. But also, the people who are being searched, the people who are police, work in the police force themselves, women, who... What about their rights to not be searched or be changing with someone who's now, for that particular day, feels like they're now a woman?
Yeah, it's interesting because in this situation you're looking for a victim, OK? And we're being told just in recent times that the victim is actually the trans person, whereas in many cases the victim is the female police officer that's been working at the station for some time, the female suspect that's being searched by the trans person. We're forgetting they could be victims too. But what we have to be able to do is boil it down to basic biology and science. Not to undermine any trans issue, but because it's the one thing we can base truth in, and without truth, none of this makes sense to any of us. So we have to, I think the birth certificate's probably a good idea, but we have to be able to say it's one or the other. You can't carry more than one warrant card, because that is the Wayne Couzens thing, whilst it's a good example, and some people think it's extreme, but it's very possible that could happen. And if that can happen, it's a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, what do you think about this? It really gets to the crux of...
Yeah, I think because I remember reading the article, and it was one of those... The thing that's really concerning is the idea, if you're carrying two, and it said you can switch depending on the day, depending on how you feel or how you identify, that's the biggest issue for me, because it puts people completely in uncertainty. Is the same person who you might not be comfortable being searched by might go, well, actually, I'm allowed to because of this. We're in the idea or in the pursuit of progressiveness and inclusivity, we've actually lost... we're potentially putting people into harm's way, and I think that's something we need to really have a think about and change.
Well, thank you for asking your question. Right, and thank you for joining me for Free Speech Nation, and thank you to my panel, Paul Cox and Adam Kumas, and to all my brilliant guests this evening, and, of course, to our wonderful audience. Give yourselves a round of applause, everybody. If you want to join us live in the studio, please go to www.sroaudiences.com, and if you have a story you know about or something that you're going through that you think we should cover on the show, please email us at freespeechnation@gbnews.uk. Stay tuned for the brilliant Ben Leo tonight. That is next. And don't forget, the headline is on every night at 11 p.m. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians talk to you through the next day's top news stories. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for watching Free Speech Nation. Goodbye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. It stays cold through the week ahead, overnight severe frosts and the continued risk of snow and ice at times too. Low pressure still in charge to end the weekend and into the beginning of next week, but it is pulling away, dragging in cold air still across many areas with wintry showers. But a cold end to Sunday, further rain and snow, particularly across northern England, southern Scotland. Warnings for snow and ice still here overnight. Heavy rain though pushing eastwards across southern and central parts of England and Wales. Again, a Met Office warning out here, could be some localised flooding. Temperatures below freezing across Northern Ireland, Scotland, some icy stretches holding up above freezing across southern parts to start Monday morning, but an unsettled start to the day. An icy start across Scotland, some disruption possible with wintry showers across the north, some clear spells across central parts, but quite frequent snow showers towards the Edinburgh area. Could be some tricky travelling conditions first thing. And across Northern Ireland, Northern England, wintry showers here, further snowfall, particularly over the higher ground. Snowing over the high ground of Wales as well, but elsewhere generally the precipitation falling as rain, fairly cloudy skies as we push through the day, and quite windy too through the day tomorrow. We see some gales around the coast, particularly in the east as the low pressure pulls away. Frequent showers still continuing here, falling as snow over the higher ground, some icy stretches continuing, and temperatures on the cold side, perhaps 4 or 5 degrees at best, locally 6 or 7 in the far south to end the afternoon. And then a quick look at Tuesday, a cold, frosty, icy start once more. Met Office warnings likely to be issued as we get closer to the time, and a day of sunny spells and wintry showers across the country. Showers most frequent across the north and the west. The further risk of rain and snow heading towards the middle of the week across southern counties. Temperatures staying on the cold side. See you soon.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£50,000 in tax-free cash is like having over £4,000 each month to play with for a whole year. And it could be yours in the biggest Great British giveaway so far. That could be a holiday each month, your mortgage covered, or just the ability to send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, our next guests have been working closely with celebrities and MPs to help clean up our planet.
Very important. Think Ocean was founded in